Hey everybody, welcome to this series on creating the U.S.S. Enterprise N.C.C. 1701E. Now that's the Enterprise from the Next Generation era. You'll see that Enterprise in the movies First Contact, Insurrection, and Nemesis. It's one of my favorite Enterprises. It's a very pretty ship. However, the model is a 1/1400 scale model from AMT. It's very small, and so there's lots of little details to work on, including drilling out hundreds of little windows. Now I'm going to show you the entire process step by step from start to finish. I will show you basically how to do each thing. I won't show you the complete thing, so you're not going to watch me drill 200 windows, but I will show you how to drill a few. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the tutorial series, and if you would like to support the channel, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. Also, there are links below the videos where I post products that I've used in those videos. Feel free to check those links out to help support the channel as well. Finally, you can support me on Patreon. And of course, post your comments and questions down below in the comments or on Twitter at Matthew Doyle Art. Enjoy the series.
For this series, I'm going to build the N.C.C. 1701E Enterprise, 1/1400 scale from AMT. Now this is a pretty complicated model, not because it's hard to build, but there are so many windows to drill out. I've already started. I've done some work off camera, so to speak, drilling windows and a few other things, and I'm going to show you some of the progress I've made. I haven't made a ton of progress, but I have made some, and I figured I'd go ahead and start this series by showing you what I have done. But I still have a lot to do, and we'll be showing most of that on camera, including drilling out windows, because I've only drilled out maybe a third of the windows. I'll show you all the tools I use and where you can get them, and I've also figured out the painting scheme based on some internet research, and I'll show you that when I get to the painting part. I've already bought some of the paints. I'm using Vallejo Model Air, which is a great paint. A lot of model builders on the internet use it as well. So if you look around, you'll see a lot of guys are using Model Air. And anyway, I've got all the colors for the Enterprise E, and I'll go through all the different colors that I'm going to be using when I get to that part. But let's go ahead and get started. Let's have a look inside the box. And you can see that I've already taken all the parts off of the sprues. I don't recommend you do that normally, but there's not a lot of parts to this model. It's actually a pretty easy model to build. So I went ahead and did that and pulled the parts off so that I could basically wash them. These are just leftover sprue parts. You might want to keep those in case you ever want to use them for anything like spacers or any kind of stuff you need to build. Here's the base. Comes with the kit. It's pretty nice, so I'll probably end up using it because I do like it. And I don't want to go too crazy on the base. My opinion is you don't want to make a base that takes away from the model. You want it to complement the model, but you don't want it to be the main part of the model, right? So I think this base works. It's nice and simple. And I should be able to fit the switch and the power on it somewhere. If not, we'll see. I can always adjust it. So I've taken all these parts off the sprue, soaped them in Dawn dish detergent, and scrubbed them with a gentle, soft toothbrush. And in my sink, there's my toothbrush. And all these parts are basically ready to go, ready to be used. And I've already started on the saucer, which is where the instructions tell you to start on the saucer part. And I figured that would make sense to start there. Those are the decals, by the way. I may or may not use them. I bought some decals from JT Graphics. They haven't arrived yet, but we'll see. So let's go ahead and put all this aside and have a look at our saucer. So I've got the two saucer halves here. Obviously the top on the right and then the bottom here on the left, which would be flipped like this and go underneath. Now, it's a good idea to always test fit your parts before you start gluing things together in case you need to make some adjustments. And I've done this already for the saucer, and it fits pretty snug. In fact, it'll snap into place without glue and stay pretty well. But it is a little difficult to wrangle it in there to begin with. It's such a snug fit. You'll see these tick marks, though, on the model. These are kind of the snap points. I went ahead and marked them with a black marker so I could see where they need to line up. And just keep fiddling with it here until it snaps into place. Again, it's really tight. It's kind of hard to get it in there in the first place, but once you find it, it will snap into place and pretty much stay. You might kind of have to push on it on the sides to kind of mushroom the whole thing out a little bit to get it to go in there. But you can see here I'm fumbling with it quite a bit, and like I said, it's a pretty tight fit. You might want to grind it a little bit on the edges, but I don't recommend it because this plastic's really sensitive. You can see this big X here that I drew on the saucer on the bottom. I'm going to be wiring for lighting through the saucer, and I need the wires to go down into my secondary hole. So I basically drilled a hole here with my Dremel tool. I use a Dremel stylus, and I don't think they sell these anymore new. I bought this one off of eBay for $100, but I like it because it's kind of like a gun shape, and it's very stable in your hand. But you can probably find a newer version of this on Amazon or somewhere. I have a bigger Dremel. This is perfect for a modeling table. I wouldn't use the bigger one. That stays in my garage. This one's more ideal for modeling tables, and you get a lot of stability in your hand. But anyway, I drilled the hole out, and we've got some multiple drill settings here. So if I turn it on, we can turn it all the way up to the maximum speed there, nice and fast, and then way down to the bottom, nice and slow. Perfect for working on delicate models like this. So anyway, I drilled the hole so I can pull the wires through down into the secondary hole, and I basically figured out where that hole needed to go. I fit the two halves of the secondary hole together, taped them together, and then put them there so that I could find out the best spot for that hole. And then, just drilled the hole here. Marked it with an X, and then drilled it. All right, so let's go ahead and just pull this apart and look at something else I did. Now you can see I started to drill holes here for the windows. So I'll bring this up closer to the camera here and try to focus it for you. All right, so you can see I started to drill some of the windows here on the saucer. Now, these windows here are pretty easy to drill, but there are some windows on this spot here on the sides and on the bottom of the saucer here, this little ledge, really tiny baby windows, and they're really hard to drill. And I have to use a really small drill bit, and they're really hard to get in there. They're so tiny, really hard to get in the right angle there. It takes a little bit more time to drill these, and I used a 0.5 millimeter micro drill bit and a 0.6, and even that's still a little too big, but I think I'm just going to have to live with the results, and they're not bad, but it is going to take you a lot more time on that spot. All right, so here's the top, and the other thing I wanted to mention here is there has to be some navigation lights put in on the saucer. So we've got a red blinker and a green blinker, and then a solid white in the front. And then behind the bridge here, we have another blinker, a white blinker. And I used references from the internet to figure out exactly where these blinkers need to go. So let's do a quick close-up here of these spots. So you can see here, this is one of the navigation lights, and then the other one on the other side here, I've already drilled a hole. The other one wasn't drilled yet, but that was done with a 0.7 millimeter micro drill bit, and it might be even a 0.6. I think it was a 0.7 though, for drilling to scale here. And I ordered some lights from Tinted Controls for the blinkers and whatnot in the control board. The problem is the lights are actually too big for scale here to put in these holes, obviously. So I'm going to be using fiber optics to do that, and it's a really tight fit here. So I did a little grinding on the edges, not on the top part of the hole, but on the bottom part of the saucer. And hopefully I can fit my fiber optics in here, because I'm going to need one for the top and one for the bottom, but we'll see when we get to that point. So what I originally did is I used too big of a drill bit here. You can see it's a slightly different color here. And because I used too big of a drill bit, I kind of destroyed that part. And so I had to recreate it. And the way I recreated it is I used epoxy sculpt, which is something I was recommended by Simon Merks on his channel for sculpting and filling in windows or whatever. And it works great. It's a two-part epoxy for filling in holes and gaps. And there's another spot here where I drilled a window too big. I don't know if you can see it. There's a slight discoloration on the ledge there of the, I guess that's like the B deck or the C deck, not sure. There was a window there. It was too big, so I filled that in with epoxy sculpt. I could have probably used any other kind of putty there, but what I like about the epoxy sculpt is that I was able to reshape the part here using my little sculpting tool. And here's the tool I use. It's actually a Games Workshop tool for working with special paints and stuff that won't react to resins and things like that. It's a plastic tool. And let me show you the actual epoxy sculpt. Let's go ahead and pull that out. So here's the B part of epoxy sculpt. You can see A and B, and then two parts. So we can go ahead and open it up. And they come in different colors too. But what you do is you take 2 pieces of it if you're working with small amounts and just put it together 50-50. Knead it for about a minute. And once you've kneaded it for a minute, let it rest for another 5 according to the instructions, and you're good to go. It takes at least an hour before it starts to set, so you can really spend a lot of time working on it. And then it 24 hours for a complete rock hard set. And but even when it's rock hard, it's still drillable and sandable. Now, if you take your finger in water and you got a sculpting tool you can dip in water, you can actually work with it a lot easier. It becomes more malleable while it's not cured yet, so you can really get in there and shape it and stuff and get whatever shape you want. Because while it's dry, it's really kind of sticky and hard to work with. And that might work for some situations, but sometimes you're going to want to have more malleability, and adding just a tad bit of water and playing with your finger or your sculpting tool with it will really do a good job. I have some gloves here that I use. These are black nitrile gloves. I don't always use them, mostly when I'm painting and stuff and I don't want to get fingerprints on the model. But you can work with that epoxy sculpt without gloves, and it comes right off your hands with soap and water. It's really, really gentle, actually. So anyway, I fixed those spots up, drilled the holes with a smaller bit, and I'll be putting fiber optics. In fact, I've got some Plastruct fiber optic here that I bought off of Amazon. This is .030, and don't ask me why it's not the same measurement, but it does fit perfectly inside this 0.7 millimeter hole. All right, so what else have I done here? I did start to add some photo etch from Paragraphics here. See if I can zoom in. So this is the Paragraphics photo etch for the Enterprise E. This is the sensor band pieces here. There are 4 pieces there, actually. You can also see behind the bridge, there's a hole for the blinker. I spent some time researching this on the First Contact movie pictures, and this little blinker, this navigation light, is actually right next to those windows, which were pretty hard to drill. And it's not on the bridge, it's behind the bridge. So that was a very small hole that had to be added in for the blinker. Pretty hard to do. I kind of made a mistake, so I drilled too big. So I, again, used some epoxy sculpt, filled it in, reshaped it, and then re-drilled my hole with a 0.7. These windows were a lot of fun to drill. They were so small. I used a 0.5 millimeter drill bit on those, and they were all so close together. It took me a while. And same thing with these back windows here. And basically all the windows on the top part, the triangular needle shape of the ship, the A, B, and C deck, these all had to be done with a 0.5 millimeter or 0.6 millimeter drill bit. You could probably have gone even smaller with a 0.4 millimeter, but I used a 0.5. But all the other windows on the top of the saucer I could do with a 0.7 millimeter drill bit, and that's what I used for all these windows. Now I'll put an LED strip tape under this later so you can see how it looks so far, but definitely the most tedious part of building this ship. The rest of the model goes pretty quick. There's not a lot of windows on the bottom, but there are some, and nothing obviously on the nacelles, a few on the secondary hull. But prepare to spend most of your time on this model drilling out windows. And I'll show you some of that drilling process on camera here in a bit. Some of the other things I did, I added some Paragraphics photo etch here for the shuttle bay doors because they come clear from the kit. So I used the photo etch to make them solid, opaque. So here's my Paragraphics set. If you're not familiar with Paragraphics, you should as a model builder. You can see here I've got some parts left still. I've got the grills for the warp nacelles, some other parts for the warp nacelles, and the deflector dish. But I used the shuttle bay here from, it comes with 2 shuttle bays, one for the Nemesis ship and one for the First Contact ship. And I'm an originalist, so I went with the First Contact version. And I don't know, I just prefer the originals of everything usually. And anyway, no big deal. But yeah, there's my photo etch. And I also put the impulse grill photo etch on the impulse engines here. So let's see if we can get close enough to see this. So I started putting them on, and what I did is I basically started out by grinding the front side here, the details. Paragraphics recommends you grind off the front side because it does have the grills modeled into the plastic, and you want to be able to put the photo etch on top of that. So I used my Dremel stylus to file that down with a sanding drum very, very carefully, and then filed it and then polished it. And then I painted the backs of these with some Tamiya clear red acrylic in my airbrush. You can see here, X27, and then painted that 3 different layers of red to get nice deep red on the back side of the impulse grills. And before that, I did frost it, so you could sand it to frost it, but I used some glass frosting spray paint, did about 3 layers of that for frosting glass. You can just look that up on Amazon, and you can find that pretty easily. And yeah, so that worked pretty well. Frosted my glass, waited for that to dry, and in my 3 coats of Tamiya clear red. Now, I'm still going to use a red LED here to give it more of a boost, but I'm going to sand that LED so it diffuses the light, and then box this in with some sheet styrene so that the red doesn't bleed into the rest of the saucer, and of course light block that. You can also see I've got another LED already in here. So this is a very tiny SMD. It's literally the smallest SMD you can order, I believe. I can't think of the number right now, but it's the size of a flea. But basically that's there for the floodlight to light up the registry numbers here on the top of the dish. And you can just see right there on that tiny, tiny ledge, which is, I guess, the C deck there. See if I can zoom in for you. Kind of hard to see. You can kind of see where there's some white putty marks. That's kind of where I was experimenting and drilled some holes. And so I've put the SMD there, lined it up. It's right there where it's supposed to be in the model. And yeah, real pain in the butt, but I drilled a hole, put some putty in, super glued it in place, and yeah, so I tested it. So far it works, even though it's been super glued and puttied in place. The light still works, fortunately, but we'll see. I still got to prime the model, and I don't know if that's going to end up covering it up, and it's going to require a mask, a really tiny piece of masking tape to cover that. We'll see how that works. Worst case scenario, I have to rip it out, and after I prime it and everything, and redo it with another SMD. But yeah, back to the impulse grills. You can see on the front side, I've added some masking tape and some putty around the edges. The reason for that is that unfortunately the photo etch from Paragraphics, it's a great piece for the grills, but it's not perfect. It doesn't fit the hole perfectly, so there is some light bleed. I don't think you're gonna be able to see it here on camera, but just on the right side there, you can see there's a slight gap, and that's gonna create a light bleed actually of the red impulse engines behind there. So I'm going to have to cover that up. You put that red light behind there, it's going to bleed all around the entire edges of this, unfortunately. So my trick was to putty it using some perfect plastic putty. So I cut out a piece of blue painter's tape, covered up most of the grill. But anyway, yeah, puttied over it with some perfect plastic putty. So the perfect plastic putty here, you can see, works really great. It's very fluid. You can put it in a syringe and squirt it out with that. And I've used this for doing seams on Warhammer miniatures and stuff, but it's from Deluxe, and it works great for doing this. It's a nice fluid putty. I guess you could use Mr. Dissolve putty or something like that. So I just spread it around the edges, and I'll sand it, obviously, and then prime over it and sand it again and paint it black, and hopefully that will solve my light leak issues around the edges of the impulse grills here. Anyway, we'll see. Every model is different. Every model has its problems, and this is one of the problems I'm having to deal with here. Hopefully everything comes out okay, and it looks good when I take the tape off. But I may have to reorder some more Paragraphics impulse grills and create another clear styrene sheet if worst case scenario. Hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully it looks good when it's done. So that pretty much sums it up, brings you up to speed on where I'm at. There's some other things I worked on, like the shuttle-based stuff, but I got these lights from Tinted Controls. Great kit. This gives you all the pulsing effect for the warp engines as well as the navigation blinkers. And the circuit board's really tiny. Let me pull it out here. I'll get into this more when I get into the electronics. I've already done some soldering for resistors and stuff, but here's the circuit board, really tiny, super, super awesome from Tinted Controls here. Really impressed with their stuff. All right, so this is going to be a long build because of the windows. This pretty much covers what I've done so far. So let's go ahead and do some drilling here on the top to show you my technique. So you can see we've got some windows here that are demarcated on the model. They're kind of like little indentations. Let me see if I can get a little closer for you. All right, so we're a little closer in here, so hopefully you'll be able to see me drill one of these windows. But basically, the technique for drilling windows is to drill one hole at the top of the window and one hole at the bottom of the window. And then what I do is I use the drill bit to kind of saw through the middle. But you have to be really careful because these drill bits will break. And if necessary, I can bring in my X-Acto knife to cut, but that tends to be a little bit harder to do. the other thing is you don't want to drill out all of the windows. You want to drill out roughly 2/3 of the windows and leave the other third still in the plastic. That way it looks like some people are sleeping or not in their rooms or whatever. Aesthetically, I think that has a good look. You don't want to drill out every single window. It just looks odd. All right, so let's just pick a window right here. I'm gonna pick this window and drill. Take my pin vise. This is a 0.7. Again, you could probably go down to a 0.6 maybe, but the great thing about this 0.7 is it doesn't break very easily. It's a lot more sturdy. I did buy a second pin vise off of Amazon here that can hold down to a 0.3 millimeter, but these break a lot easier. Anything under like a 0.5 millimeter will break a lot more easily. And so this works great for doing the really small windows in the top part, the A, B, and C deck. All right, so let's jump back to the window, and we'll start with the top hole here. Make sure I'm on camera here for you. Oh, and I do have a magnifier here, so always recommended when you're doing small work like this, use a jeweler's magnifier. And I know this is really close to the camera right now, so it's kind of hard to see, but this is a great tool. Obviously, I have it on all the time. Otherwise, I cannot see any of this stuff. My 43-year-old eyes are not capable of handling this small detail. All right, so we'll start with the top part of the window here, and I'll turn on the light on my magnifier here and just start drilling. Let the drill do most of the work. Just put a tiny bit of pressure here. You don't want to break your drill bits, and just try to drill, straight down into the window at basically at a perpendicular angle or 90 degrees to the plastic. And we'll just go ahead and get this first hole drilled. There we go. I'm through. So tiny little hole there. You can probably see it on camera, but I can barely see it. All right, and so we'll drill the bottom hole here now. Again, at the very bottom of the window. Be real careful when you're doing these first pilot holes, because the drill will have a tendency to want to skip across the plastic surface. So make sure you get it in the right spot and just a good enough amount of pressure to keep it from moving the drill bit. And then, again, drill kind of at a 90-degree angle to the plastic. At least in this case, that you're going to want to vary the angle based on the situation. I'm just checking the drill here, cleaning it off a little bit. And then also make sure when you're drilling at an angle that you don't drill too obliquely when you're first starting, because it can cause marks on the rest of the hole. So now that I've got my 2 marks here, I'm going to need to get rid of the center part. Now you'd think you could just come in here with the drill and drill the center part out. The problem is the drill will have a tendency to slip into either of the other holes, so it won't stay in the middle. So what I do at this point is I go at a very oblique angle, and I kind of drill sideways into the center part, but very gently, very carefully, because I don't want to create any marks on the hole around the window. And so I'm drilling sideways into the middle part to kind of push it out of the way, and you'll kind of feel it give. And once it does, you can kind of start wedging it in there and sawing the drill bit gently back and forth in the hole, and it will start to clear that whole piece out. Now again, be careful. You don't want to break your drill bit here, so do the sawing action very gently here, and just kind of go back and forth. You can see here, it's this 0.7 drill bit does a really good job of clearing that hole out. So there we go. Nice little window hole. And at this point, all that's left is just clearing out any little stragglers of the plastic flashing, you're probably going to, because of the sawing action and the drilling, you're going to have little shreds of it. Just clear that out so it's nice and clean. Turn it over now at this point, and you can see there's a lot of flashing from the back side. And you can see here I've done my light blocking already and primed the back. And just make sure when you do that to let it dry for at least a day, if not 2, before you start drilling holes. And because if you don't, it's going to be a real mess back here when you're trying to drill the holes out. Just make sure it's thoroughly dry, but better not to paint it at all until all your windows are actually drilled out. I kind of skipped a step here. And I'm gonna have to actually go back now and do some more light blocking on these windows, because after drilling them out and cleaning them up, it does leave some light leaks around the windows, so I'm gonna have to repaint that. But anyway, I'm using my X-Acto knife here just to kind of clean off scrape away some of that flashing from drilling, and then I can take my drill again and just go in from the other side here and just kind of saw it back and forth to kind of clean it out. And of course, you could come in here with sandpaper as the last step to really clean these windows up. But yeah, that's pretty much all you have to do here. they're so small, you don't necessarily have to sand it. You're really not going to see, unless you get really, really close to the windows here. But there you go. There's our nice, clean new window. Looks good. So that's how you drill windows out. And I wish I could use an actual drill, a mechanical drill, but none of the drills I have, the Dremel, I've also got the Tamiya handy drill, they will not handle anything below about a 1 millimeter drill bit. So you can see here on the bottom, I've got some windows I had drilled out. Problem is when I drilled them, I broke the middle part because it's so thin. So I filled it in with epoxy sculpt. And now I just need to go back in here that the epoxy sculpt's had a day to dry. Give it 24 hours for a solid rock hard dry. And I'm just going to use my drill bit now to fix those windows. And hopefully this time they won't break the middle part there the way I did when I first drilled it. So if you ever start drilling a window out or something and you screw it up, don't freak out, don't fret. You can always come back with some epoxy sculpt or some putty and just fill in your mistakes and shape it and sand it to get it the way you want. And just redo it. So that's the great thing about working with this stuff. If you have all the right tools and you make mistakes, everything is fixable. Everything is fixable. Don't freak out. Don't think you got to order a whole new model. Unless you do something really drastic, most things can be fixed. And the trick there is just having all the right tools, right? Making sure you have everything you need for every possible problem or thing you need to do. Having sheet styrene on hand for repairs, having epoxy and putty, and tools like drills and whatnot, pin vices to do all this work is critical. All right, so just about got this window drilled out, and just be gentle when you're drilling through epoxy sculpt. It is pretty strong, but it's not as strong as the plastic, the sheet styrene of the model. So you do need to be a little more careful when you're drilling this stuff out. But just about got it here. This window repaired. Let's see if I can show it to you on camera. There we go. So looks good. All right, so I did promise to show you the ship with an LED strip so you can see the lights. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the lights, and then I'll show you how the impulse engine looks. So I've got an LED strip here. This is a double density strip, and so there are more LEDs in a shorter span of the strip. LED strip tape here. This is 3825. 3825 is 3.8 by 2.5 millimeter SMDs, and they're not the brightest. So I believe 2835s are the brightest SMDs. These are kind of the mid-range. I can't remember if the 5050s are brighter or less bright, but I chose these because they're also cool white, and I want the inside of my ship to have kind of a bluish white lighting. Not completely white, because when I watch the shows, the movies, First Contact and whatnot, the lighting when you pass by the ship, the window lights look kind of blue to me, and I kind of like that look. So I've got my my power supply over here, and I'm going to go ahead and just wire up my LEDs here. I'm running it. I'm going to run it at 9 volt for this model. So I'm going to set my power supply to 9 volts. I'm using a Dr. Meter power supply, DC power supply. It's a model HY3003D. I can't remember if I got it off of Amazon or eBay. It's probably eBay. So I'm going to run these at 8.5 volts instead of 9 volt, which means I'm going to have to run a pretty high resistor. I'm not sure what amount of resistance I'm going to need. It could be a 2K ohm resistor. It could be 4K. I don't know. I'm going to have to do some math to figure that out. But I want to bring this down from 9 volt to 8.5 volts because I think 9 volts is way too bright for the scale of this model. But let's go ahead and hook them up to my power supply. Again, I'm running at 8.5 volts. And I'm going to hook up my hot here on the red wire with my alligator clips. And then we'll hook up my ground. There we go. So I have my nice cool white lighting. And we'll just drop the ship over that to see if we can get a look at what it's going to look like. I'm going to have to turn my lights off here. We'll go turn off my other one. All right, so I think you get a pretty good look there of the ship. It's not exactly centered on camera, but you get the idea. So it might look a little bright on the camera, a little because of the lens flares and the glow, but in person it's much less bright. And I could, I'll pump it up to 9 volts, and that's still not too bad.
Again, it looks really bright on camera. But, you know, and there's a lot of light leaks right now because of the fact that the light blocking has to be reapplied since I've drilled all these windows out. But I don't know if you can even see that on camera. But I'm going to drop it back down to 8.5. I kind of like that look a little bit better. Looks good. It's going to look great when it's finished. All right, so let's look at one more thing. I've got a red LED here. Let me find my little container of red LEDs. Here we go. So I got a 5 millimeter red LED. Probably can't see that very well in the darkness. Now I'm going to connect this LED without a resistor, so I need to bring my voltage way down for these, probably about 2 volts, at least to start with. Okay, so we'll go ahead and hook that up now. So on my LED here, we've got a positive lead and a negative lead. The positive lead is a longer part, a longer wire here, so we'll hook that up to my positive alligator clip here. And then my negative, there we go. All right, so we got a nice bright 5 millimeter LED here for the impulse engines, and we'll just drop this on top of it. And looks great in person. I mean, it looks fantastic. Again, I'm gonna sand this LED so it's not so bright. It's more diffuse, I guess. And it's gonna be boxed in, but it's kind of hard to see. It's really bright on the camera. Obviously, there's a lot of a light bloom going on there, but it looks great in person. Looks fantastic. There is, however, light bleed around the edges of the impulse grills. I'm going to have to do the same thing, the same treatment here that I did to the other impulse engine. Cool. Hey, thanks for watching my video. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment to support the channel. Also, if you'd like to keep this channel going, be sure to check me out on Patreon in the link below the video. Finally, you can check out some of the products I used in this video below, again, in the description on YouTube. You'll find links to Amazon where you can check those products out for yourself. So also follow me on Twitter at Matthew Doyle Art. You can post comments and questions, and you might actually get those comments and questions read on the next video. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.